this episode, we focus on what happens after auditors identify findings, because this is the point where many organizations either improve meaningfully or fall into a cycle of repeating the same issues every year. A finding is an observation that something did not meet an expectation, such as a missing control, a weak process, inconsistent evidence, or an unmanaged exception. Findings can come from internal audits, external audits, customer assessments, or regulatory reviews, and they often arrive with formal language that can feel intimidating to beginners. The key is to treat findings as signals that point to real weaknesses, not as personal criticism and not as paperwork problems to be hidden. Evaluating and validating findings means confirming what the finding actually says, whether it is accurate, what scope it affects, and how serious it is. Building responses that address root causes means going beyond superficial fixes like updating a document and instead changing the conditions that allowed the issue to exist. This lesson teaches how to interpret findings carefully, respond professionally, and design remediation that reduces real risk and withstands future scrutiny. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to start is understanding that not every finding is equally clear, and some findings are written in a way that can be misread or overgeneralized. Evaluating a finding begins by restating it in plain language, including what requirement or expectation it relates to, what evidence was missing or inconsistent, and what behavior or outcome the auditor observed. This restatement should be factual and neutral because emotionally loaded language can push teams into defensiveness. Beginners often assume an audit finding means the control does not exist, but sometimes it means the control exists but was not performed consistently, or it was performed but not documented properly. Those are different problems with different remediation. You also want to confirm the time period the finding refers to, because evidence gaps can be tied to specific months or specific changes. When you restate findings clearly, you reduce the risk of fixing the wrong problem. Clarity at this stage is not bureaucratic. It is the foundation for effective action. Validation is the next step, and it means confirming whether the finding is accurate and understanding its true scope. Validation does not mean arguing with the auditor or trying to make the finding go away. It means collecting internal facts to confirm what happened, such as reviewing records, checking system configurations, and interviewing control owners. If the finding is accurate, validation clarifies whether it affects one system or many systems, one team or multiple teams, and whether it is a one-time lapse or a systemic pattern. If the finding is not accurate, validation helps you build a professional response that explains why, supported by evidence. For beginners, it helps to see validation as quality control on the assessment itself. Audits are conducted by humans and based on samples, so misunderstandings can happen. A mature organization validates with respect and facts, ensuring the response is grounded and the remediation targets the true issue. Once findings are validated, evaluation includes assessing risk, because findings are often framed in compliance language rather than in business impact language. A missing access review might indicate a risk of unauthorized access, while an incomplete incident response record might indicate a risk of delayed containment or failed reporting obligations. Evaluating risk means asking what could happen because of this gap, how likely it is, and how quickly it needs to be addressed. It also means considering regulatory or contractual consequences, such as whether the finding affects certification status or triggers additional oversight. Beginners sometimes assume any finding is catastrophic, which can lead to panic and poorly planned fixes. Other times, organizations downplay findings as paperwork, which leads to superficial remediation and repeated issues. A balanced evaluation uses both compliance seriousness and operational risk seriousness. This balance helps prioritize remediation and allocate resources wisely. It also supports transparent communication with leadership because leaders need to understand why the finding matters beyond the audit report. Root cause analysis is where responses become meaningful because it identifies why the finding occurred, not just what was observed. Root cause analysis asks what conditions allowed the gap to exist and why the control did not prevent it. For example, if access reviews were not completed, the root cause might be unclear ownership, a process that depends on a single person, or an inventory that does not identify all relevant accounts. If evidence was missing, the root cause might be that evidence is generated manually and is not integrated into workflows, or that storage is disorganized and retrieval is unreliable. If a control was implemented inconsistently, the root cause might be that teams interpret the requirement differently or that the control is too burdensome under real workloads. For beginners, the key idea is that the first explanation is rarely the root cause. Saying people forgot is not a root cause. It is a symptom of a system that did not support consistent execution. Root cause analysis shifts the focus from blaming people to fixing systems, which produces more durable improvement. Building a response that addresses root causes means designing corrective actions that change behavior and conditions, not just words on paper. A good corrective action plan identifies what will be done, who will do it, when it will be done, and how success will be verified. It also distinguishes between immediate containment actions and longer-term preventive actions. Immediate actions might reduce exposure quickly, such as completing a missed review or tightening access temporarily. Preventive actions might redesign the process, assign clearer ownership, automate evidence capture, or improve training so execution becomes consistent. Beginners often think remediation is a single task, but durable remediation usually involves multiple steps: correct the current state, improve the process, and verify operation over time. Responses that focus only on closing the finding quickly often create paper security, where the audit is satisfied but the underlying weakness remains. Responses that address root causes may take more effort, but they reduce repeat findings and strengthen real security. Another important part of building responses is ensuring that corrective actions are proportionate and realistic. If the response is too ambitious, it may never be completed, and the organization may end up with an overdue plan that increases scrutiny. If the response is too small, it may not reduce risk, and the finding will likely return. Proportionate responses consider the severity and scope of the finding, the organization's capacity, and the operational impact of changes. They also consider dependencies, because fixing one area may require changes in another, such as improving asset inventory before patch metrics can be trusted. For beginners, it helps to think of remediation like repairing a leak. A patch might stop water temporarily, but if the pipe is corroded, you need a stronger repair. You also need to ensure you can actually do the repair without shutting down the entire building unexpectedly. Proportionate remediation respects both risk and operational reality, which increases the chance of real completion. Responses must also include a verification plan, because auditors and leaders need evidence that corrective actions were implemented and that they work. Verification can include updated records, repeated control testing, and metrics that show improved performance over time. For example, if the finding involved missed reviews, verification might include showing that reviews are now completed on schedule for several cycles and that the process has clear ownership. If the finding involved inconsistent patching, verification might include showing improved remediation timelines and improved inventory completeness. Verification should be designed so it is not a one-time proof, but evidence of sustained operation. Beginners should understand that auditors are often skeptical of one-time fixes because one-time fixes do not prove a control is now reliable. Verification builds confidence by showing that the improvement is embedded into operations. It also supports internal learning because metrics and repeated checks can reveal whether the corrective action needs refinement. Communication and documentation are also part of responding to findings because the organization must often provide formal responses and maintain traceable records. A professional response acknowledges the finding, describes the root cause, outlines corrective actions, and provides timelines and evidence plans. It avoids defensive language and avoids vague promises. It also avoids blaming individuals because that weakens trust and may not address systemic issues. For internal stakeholders, communication should translate the response into what teams must do differently, because corrective actions that do not reach operational teams remain theoretical. For beginners, the key idea is that the response document is not only for the auditor. It is also a control artifact that guides remediation and proves governance discipline. When responses are clear and honest, auditors and leaders tend to view the organization as responsible and improving, even if the finding was significant. When responses are vague or combative, scrutiny increases and trust declines. Finally, addressing root causes requires follow-through and closure discipline, because plans are easy to write and harder to execute. Follow-through includes tracking corrective actions, escalating when deadlines slip, and verifying completion with objective evidence. It also includes checking for unintended consequences, because changes can create new friction that leads to workarounds if not managed. A mature approach revisits findings after remediation to confirm that the underlying issue is resolved and that the control operates consistently. This creates a feedback loop where each audit cycle strengthens the program rather than repeating the same weaknesses. For beginners, the important lesson is that compliance improvement is a system, not an event. You evaluate and validate findings, you fix root causes, and you verify that fixes hold over time. When this discipline is consistent, the organization builds credibility and reduces both compliance risk and operational risk. Evaluating and validating findings and building responses that address root causes is the practice of turning audit results into lasting improvement rather than temporary paperwork fixes. You begin by restating findings in plain language and validating accuracy and scope with facts, then assess risk so remediation is prioritized appropriately. Root cause analysis shifts the focus from surface symptoms to the conditions that allowed the gap to occur, such as unclear ownership, weak workflows, poor evidence capture, or inconsistent interpretation. Corrective action plans then include immediate corrections, preventive process improvements, clear owners, deadlines, and verification methods that prove sustained control operation. Proportionate responses balance urgency and realism so plans can be completed without creating operational harm or compliance fatigue. Clear documentation and honest communication build trust with auditors and internal leaders, while disciplined follow-through ensures corrective actions are actually implemented and monitored. When organizations respond this way, findings become catalysts for stronger controls, stronger evidence readiness, and a compliance program that improves steadily instead of cycling through the same failures year after year.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.